Her name was Rita Levine. She was 39 years old and lived in Center City, Philadelphia, an attorney for the Defender Association. She wanted also to be able to practice law in Israel, so she was there on leave, taking a series of exams. But a bus crash caused by a terrorist on July 6th would change her life and eventually end it.
Blue and white Israeli flags surround the metal and rubber remnants of the bus aboard which Rita Levine was riding to Jerusalem. The makeshift memorial to her and the other 15 victims, 25 passengers were injured, is near the bottom of a 200-foot deep ravine where the bus broke apart and burst into flames. It's hard for the Israelis to believe that a thing like this could have happened here on Israel's Route number 1, the main road from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Rita Levine was aboard bus number 405, the Tel Aviv-Jerusalem Express.
My name is Jennifer Stein. I am president of the Philadelphia Council of Na'amat USA. I first met Rita about 4 years before her death, when she became involved with Na'amat. Rita brought to our chapter a deep understanding of Israel and the Israeli people. But more importantly, Rita still lived the ideals of the 60s. She was committed to political action and involvement. She was a Jewish feminist, and she strongly identified with Na'amat's work, especially our role in advocating women's rights both here and in Israel. Shortly after Rita's death, her family and friends, together with her colleagues at the Defender Association, formed a group to establish a legal aid facility in Rita's memory. The Rita Levine Legal Aid Bureau will be part of Na'amat's Community Center in Carmiel, Israel. The center will provide free legal aid to all Israeli women. For those of you who never met Rita Levine, we hope that her story, told here by her friends and family, will acquaint you with this remarkable woman. Rita Levine was born on July 20th, 1950, at the Jewish Hospital in Philadelphia. Rita was the middle child in a family of 3 girls and spent her early years living in the Oxford Circle section of Northeast Philadelphia. Rita's younger sister, Joan Levine.
I remember when we grew up, we were born in Oxford Circle and lived on Sterling Street, and Rita loved that house. And our memories were of going to Carnell Elementary School, where I would not leave my sister's side in the playground, at recess time, and going to the Bushrod Library to pick up books to read and hear stories. Rita loved to read.
Rita's parents, Gert and Sidney Levine.
Rita would come home from school, and I had a habit of leaving all our mail, all the periodicals, the magazines, the papers, on the stairway going up to the upstairs. And Rita would come in through the door, sit down on our marble floor, and just go through all the magazines. She didn't have time even to come in and say, "Hi, Mom."
They were great memories. We grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly Jewish, and a lot of children, and we all used to walk to Temple Shalom for all the Jewish holidays, and it was really quite special, and we loved that. That was another aspect of life on Sterling Street that Rita and I often reminisced about and loved.
We took our children all over. We exposed them to everything that was important, we felt. There probably may have been a few things along the way that we passed up. However, it was a family that moved as a unit.
I would say that we were a very traditional family, and that was really nice. And we knew all the holidays, we had studied about them. It was truly a treat to be in the house at Yuntif, when my mother would make Yuntif, as she calls it. So it was really fun.
Rita, Helene, and Joni all went to Cornell, and Rita was in the 2nd grade. They had parents' night, and her father and I came into the room, and you were to sit down in your child's desk. They had the name across the desk, and we sat down, and I can't recall the name of the teacher. And as we went up and down the rows, she had comments to make, and she came to one of our neighbors and said, "You didn't teach your child any manners, and you've done a very poor job." And Sidney whispered, "I wonder what she's going to tell us," because she seemed very, outspoken, and he was just a little concerned. And then when she came to us, she said, we introduced herself. We are Mr. and Mrs. Levine, Rita's parents. Rita's parents. Every paper that was up in that room was Rita's. You did such a job. She is such a treasure.
When Rita was 11, her family moved to the suburban community of Pine Valley. She attended George Washington Junior and Senior High School. She immersed herself in school activities, the drama club, tennis, the World Affairs Council, the newspaper staff, the language club, and many others. Academically, she continued to excel. And in 1967, she graduated with honors.
When Rita decided that she would like to go to Wisconsin, we went to her counselor at school, and the counselor said, "We're a new school. This is only the 2nd graduating class, and we have nothing to base this on, and I don't know if they will accept someone from the Northeast." And so she said, "I do not think you should apply." But Rita had excellent marks, and she said, "Mother, I want to do it." I said, "Fine." We filled out her application, we sent it away. Well, we waited, and finally we get a letter. Rita is in school, but I get the letter at home. The mail comes, and I open it up, and they say, "Yes, we want you. Wisconsin will take you."
She was active in the civil rights movement. She was active, she went to University of Wisconsin, which was a very political campus. And she was very active in the marches and demonstrations of the time against the war in Vietnam. Being a student of history, she truly understood what was going on.
After receiving a Bachelor of Arts degree in history from the University of Wisconsin, Rita decided to study law. She attended the law school at Temple University in Philadelphia, and upon graduation took a permanent position at the Defender Association. Rita's friend, Janice Colber.
She represented, in fact, the street people who are sitting on the bench in Philadelphia County. Many residents of Philadelphia would prefer not to see those people. They're an unpopular group. So to discuss the rights of the people who are littering our vents or who are cursing at you as you walk down the street, well, many people think that's a contradiction in terms and basically don't care about them.
Attorney Tom Cavall.
Rita's approach to representing the weakest, the most frail people in society in court was in marked difference to the way I had seen many other attorneys handle that very same role. Because other attorneys that I had come into contact with representing indigent people or representing frail people or representing powerless people in litigation somehow walked into court as if they had something to apologize for, somehow to explain that this really wasn't their life's work, that somehow this was a passing point in their professional career, that somehow this was a set of procedures that they were going to go through today. And yes, they were an attorney, but they weren't taking themselves all that seriously in a professional light. Rita believed to her heart and soul in what she was doing.
Chief Public Defender, Ben Lerner.
And Rita and Ned Levine, who was her immediate boss, and their predecessor, really developed the style of representation which was taken from representing defendants in criminal cases, and that is, to the extent our clients are competent and able to tell us what they want, we fight for them. We don't take the view that this is a procedure designed to, quote, help, unquote, these people, and if a doctor wants to put them away, that must mean it's good for them. We try to do what the client wants us to do. We advocate aggressively for the client. After all, there's a lawyer on the other side representing the petitioner's interest, and there's a neutral person, a master or a judicial officer, who's supposed to hear both sides and make a decision. And Rita brought that style of representation in an uncompromising way to this area of the law which had never seen it before. And I can tell you from personal experience that it was not appreciated. It was not appreciated by the psychiatrists, most of whom were male, and who were absolutely outraged that they had to appear at these proceedings. They were doubly outraged that they were being cross-examined. They were triply outraged that they were being cross-examined by a fairly aggressive, strong, and obviously knowledgeable woman. And they were quadruply outraged that sometimes after her cross-examination of them, the master or the judge decided to go against their recommendation. And basically, that change was something that Rita pioneered. And she pioneered it, as I said, in the face of some very strong and often some very personal opposition.
She spoke to me again and again about the fact that the mentally disabled would be put in an institution and warehoused without treatment if they were not properly represented. And she considered it her personal burden to make sure that the people who were held against their will in an institution received treatment.
I have, throughout the years, come into contact with countless lawyers, countless trial lawyers. And if it's one criticism I would make of many of them, it's that they are so hung up on the procedure of what they're about in their profession. They've lost the substance. Rita was substance-oriented. She was the essence of substance. And she used the procedure very effectively as an attorney, but always, always consistent with the substantive interests of the people she served.
Rita's brother-in-law, Edward Ross.
She'd been doing this work for quite a long time. And although from time to time she was depressed, frustrated, and feeling somewhat stressed out, she never forgot how important the work she was doing was. And I think that kept her going. And that's what kept her at the Defender Association. From time to time, Rita was invited to join law firms at much higher salaries. She, I know, contemplated doing it, but she never did. And the reason was that she understood that which she was doing was important, and she felt that she had a contribution to make.
Rita's supervisor, Ned Levine.
Rita was the kind of person who, if she didn't know about a subject, was willing to stop, become an expert, come back, and begin the discussion again at the point at which she stopped it. Rita was one of those people who never answered a question that she wasn't prepared to answer. And she used to say, you know, stop, I'm going to go and do a little more research, then I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about this or that.
Rita's friend, Rosalie Marcus Sloviter.
The thing that I really miss about Rita, and that is that because she had such a wide array of interests, that almost anything I could think of, if I said, would you like to go to New York for the day, or let's go to the theater, or, you know, let's go to the baseball game, she had an interest in that. She was very multifaceted, so she was a wonderful person to be friendly with. She wasn't a one-dimensional person, and that's something that I really, truly miss.
What did it mean to be a friend of Rita Levine?
That she would tell you exactly what she thought, and she would take your conduct to task when she thought there was a reason to do it, and that she wouldn't be polite because she was your friend, and if she thought you were off the wall, she would tell you, and she wouldn't necessarily mince words, and she wouldn't necessarily be gentle. I'm the kind of person I found that benefited from having someone in my life who would do that.
Rita's sister, Helene Ross.
Rita started wanting to study Hebrew when my children started Hebrew school. At the same time, my sister Rita started Hebrew school also. And my children would help her with her homework. And it was interesting because here they were helping their aunt, who had her law degree, and they were helping her with her Hebrew. And I think that's when Rita really started getting interested in learning the language, and of course through her readings she became very interested in Israel and in Judaism.
And Rita became very interested in modern Jewish history. And just like everything, Rita decided she wasn't going to read other people's interpretations of modern Jewish history. She went back to the source material. She read Herzl. She read Max Nordau. She read Zionist things that no one had read in 100 years, that were dry as toast. But Rita read them all. And I think that while she was beginning to read them, she was looking for a vacation in November of 1985 or 6. And that was a winter that things were very inexpensive for Americans in Israel. And Rita saw a package, and I think this was one of those 9-day, 93-city, every-minute plan type of tours that people take for the first time they go to Israel, and she went on it. She really, I think that at that point she knew what she was looking for, and she had to see it for herself. And she literally came back from that trip a changed person.
She had a wonderful time. She made friends. She told me that she felt that with the even with the problems in that society, it was a pure place, it was a free place, there was a high level of intellectual discourse there. It was simply interesting and safe. She felt very safe there, walking on the streets. There's very little crime in Israel, as we in the United States, in big cities, think of crime.
Shortly after Rita's first trip to Israel, she attended a lecture sponsored by Naamat. The speaker was Sharon Shenhoff. Sharon is an American-born lawyer who now lives in Jerusalem and practices law for Naamat. She spoke about Naamat's role as a legislative advocate for women's rights, how the organization works to support economic and social equality for the women of Israel. Rita's interest was immediately sparked. Sandy Gold, a field consultant for Naamat, recalls Rita's initial involvement.
I remember meeting Rita when she first attended a meeting when Sharon Shenhoff came and spoke. And I remember her responding during the question and answer period and being dynamic and excited and involved and almost immediately in the issues that Sharon was addressing, which was, of course, the work that was done by the legal departments of Naamat in Israel. And she approached us after this meeting, and Gloria Schlossberg, executive director of Philadelphia Council of Naamat, and I had dinner with her. It was a very eventful evening because it was the beginning of what became and what will be named very shortly the Rita Levine chapter.
Gloria Schlossberg.
It became very clear to me when we had our very first meeting at Rita's house, where she had invited some close friends of hers, mostly attorneys, and she was the spokesman for Naamat. I was there, Sandy Gold, the field consultant, was there, and yet it was Rita who informed all of her friends about every aspect of Naamat that she thought would interest them. I was very moved by that, to know that she had researched this so well, that she had undoubtedly agreed with all the issues that we fight for and the things that we support in Israel as well as in the United States. And she turned out to be our best spokesman on the very first time out.
In June 1987, Rita returned to Israel and participated in a program called Volunteers for Israel. This program sends people to Israel to work on army bases, in hospitals, and occasionally to work on kibbutzim.
She did 2 stints in the SARL program, which was the volunteers program for the Army. Once she was based in Beersheba and worked on a base fixing tanks, and we all kidded her because she had beautiful, long, slender fingers with beautiful nails about getting her hands dirty and working with the tanks. And the next time she went, she worked at a food distribution center not far from Tel Aviv. And the head person there, I don't know, in the distribution center, fell in love with her. And she said, they used to give me all these wonderful things to eat. You know, I have a special piece of fruit just for you.
The more I would interact with her, the more it became distinctly clear to me that Israel and its attraction for Rita was the only event I'd ever experienced in Rita's life that could draw her away from the tremendous attraction, enjoyment, and success, as she defined it, that she was having in the practice of law. And it was at that point I began to realize there's something very, very significant going on here.
In January of 1989, Rita took a 6-month sabbatical from the Defender Association and returned to Israel for a 4th time, traveling to Netanya, a seaside community just north of Tel Aviv. Rita lived and studied at Ulpan Akiva, a special school where students immerse themselves in the study of Hebrew. After completing 3 consecutive month-long courses, Rita decided to take an apartment in the town for the remainder of her sabbatical. With Netanya as her base, she spent the next 3 months exploring the surrounding area.
She wanted to learn Hebrew because she was contemplating a job change. She wanted to work for an American company that she would work part-time in Israel and part-time here, or work for an Israeli corporation that she would be in the States and in Israel. On the day of the accident, Rita left her house in Netanya and normally would have taken the Netanya to Jerusalem bus. But Rita was early. This was the first time, I think, that she was ever early. Rita was always late. She always said, they'll wait for me. But this one time Rita was early and got to the bus stop, and instead of taking the Netanya to Jerusalem bus, she took the Netanya Tel Aviv bus.
The purpose of the trip was to take another section of the Israeli bar examination. She had previously taken, and we learned past the property section. This day she was taking the criminal law section. She never reached Jerusalem.
This is the point where the bus careened off the highway. It's become a national shrine. Hundreds of people stop here every day to pray for the victims and meditate over this unprecedented act of terrorism. A 25-year-old Palestinian allegedly seeking revenge for wounds suffered by a friend who was beaten by Israeli soldiers in the occupied Gaza Strip grabbed the bus steering wheel away from the driver and sent it out of control over a cliff. He survived the crash and was taken under guard to a Jerusalem hospital. Rita Levine also was evacuated for emergency treatment. She sustained severe injuries to her spinal column. Do you remember the circumstances that preceded your entry into this hospital?
I know what's in my memory. I don't know if it's true or not. But I was on the bus from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I was sitting by myself. There was no one sitting next to me. I think I must have fallen asleep. And something awakened me, and I remember standing up because something was happening at the front of the bus, and I think in my mind I remember screaming, no, 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 and then the bus turned over the cliff, and I don't remember anything until people found me on the hill, and I told them I couldn't walk, I couldn't move my leg.
My sister was an incredibly strong person. Even while she was hurt so badly, she had amazing strength.
As soon as people heard about the accident, they started coming to the hospital. These were people that did not know Rita. They were Hasidic women who came to be with her. They couldn't stay with her because of the severity of her injuries, but they came, they brought her cookies, they brought her flowers, and just left their phone numbers.
I have gotten the most wonderful care, better than anybody could ever hope for, both from the people who really, I guess, saved my life on that hill and brought me to this hospital, and from the minute that I came into this hospital.
When she was hurt and in the hospital, it was a Friday night, and through the halls of the hospital they had someone playing a violin, walking through the halls, and she said, "Jay, isn't that incredible?" And they gave us Shabbos candles. And a family that we knew came up to visit. And Helene and Edward and I were there. And Dahlia made Shabbat. She put her shawl over her head and she said the bracha, and we lit the Shabbos candles. And Rita just loved Shabbat. It was a very special time for her. It just warmed her soul.
After 12 days at Hadassah Hospital, Rita underwent surgery to correct a fracture of the lower spine. The surgery was considered successful and preparations were made for her recuperation in Jerusalem. Suddenly and unexpectedly, on the afternoon of July 18th, Rita died from a pulmonary embolism. She was buried in Philadelphia on July 21st, 1989. Her funeral was attended by her family and hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by Rita.
One of Rita's colleagues from the Defender Association had called our office, knowing that Rita was a member, and suggested that the Defender Association was interested in establishing a memorial for Rita and wanted our suggestions. Coincidentally, we were in the process of building a women's center in Carmiel, which is in the northern part of Israel. It would house a legal aid bureau. I thought it was a perfect choice for them, and fortunately, they agreed that to name the legal aid bureau the Rita Levine Legal Aid Bureau would be a living memorial and extremely appropriate.
Sharon Shenhoff, Na'amat, Jerusalem.
Our legal aid bureaus are very important in every community where they are found. They tend to be one of the most exciting parts of Na'amat's work, and certainly the area that gets the most headlines. They also provide a very important service to women who have needs. I would see that the Rita Levine service in Carmiel would be particularly important because of the nature of the community in Carmiel, which is composed of many immigrants from many different countries where women did not have many rights. For example, Ethiopia, Morocco, Yemen, etc.
Na'amat is an organization that appeals to a woman who is interested in growing, who's interested in becoming aware of issues as they impact on not only her and her family, but other people, and who's interested in making a change and a difference, who comes to meetings to be educated, to grow not only Jewishly, but in terms of becoming aware of social issues, to know how to impact on legislators, to realize that her vote does make a difference, that when she puts her body on the line, when she marches in Washington to her state capital, she can make a difference. It's not an organization that's purely committed to social pleasures, and yet beautiful friendships do develop as growth takes place, as people grow together, and as they learn together, and as they make a change and make a difference together. It's a very special organization, and I think that that's why it was lucky that we attracted someone like Rita, because she was such a special woman.
The most important comment I can make is that all the time, all the attention, and all the thought and activity that have gone into remembering Rita, the memorial services for her, the foundation that has been set up, and the other activities, is not overdoing an event.
And there are situations, even now, where a certain situation comes up. There were things I would like to tell her and can't. There were things that I know that she would enjoy knowing, and she doesn't. And in that way, the loss is even more immeasurable.
I've learned so much from her. She was my mentor, my ally, my best friend, and my sister.
We can really relate to many happy days with Rita. And we can look back and say she was one girl very proud of.
Rita lives on in our memory. Her strength and her compassion continue to inspire those of us who were lucky enough to have known her. It is our hope at Na'amat that the story of Rita's life will spread beyond our circle. Not everyone can dedicate their lives to mitzvot, good deeds, in the extraordinary way that Rita did. But perhaps her example will inspire all of us to do what we can. Recently, the Rita Levine Legal Aid Bureau opened its doors for the first time. Help us celebrate Rita's life by supporting this bureau named in her memory. To support the Rita Levine Legal Aid Bureau and other Na'amat facilities, or to learn more about Na'amat's wide range of services, you can contact the organization at the following locations.